I want you to remember one detail before this story starts. I'm the one who hired her. My name is Mia. I'd been married to Peter for 6 years when his company finally let him build his own team. He needed an assistant, someone sharp, organized, someone who could keep up with him. I sat in on the interviews myself. I wanted to make sure whoever got the job was good enough for my husband. Her name was Vanessa, mid-30s, effortlessly composed, the kind of woman who made you feel underdressed just standing next to her. She answered every question perfectly. It wasn't until she smiled at something small Peter said about the office coffee machine that something in me went quiet and cold for half a second. I couldn't place it. I told myself it was nothing. I recommended we hire her that afternoon. For 2 months, everything was fine. Better than fine. Peter came home energized, talking about how Vanessa anticipated problems before he even saw them. "Best hire I've made," he told me one night. I smiled and said, "That's great, babe." I meant it. The second time I saw that smile was at the spring mixer, across the room. And it did something to my memory I couldn't name, the exact asymmetry of it, one side lifting before the other. I'd seen that smile once before, years ago, in a photo tucked in a shoebox Peter kept from before we met. A woman he never talked about. I'd always assumed she was ancient history, a name he'd mentioned once, and never again. I said nothing that night. I told myself I was imagining it, until I checked her employee file 2 days later out of an impulse I didn't fully understand, and found her resume had been uploaded to our system 11 days before the position was even posted publicly. Someone had her lined up before the job existed. I didn't need to guess whose account that resume sat in first. I confronted Peter quietly, at home, expecting denial. What I got instead was worse. Relief. He told me, almost gratefully, that his therapist had suggested reconnecting with people from his past to understand patterns he kept repeating, and that Vanessa had needed a job, and he genuinely, foolishly, thought he could keep the two things, her presence and our marriage, in separate rooms of his life. He hadn't told me about therapy at all. 6 months of it in silence, while I'd been complimenting him on being more present than usual and assuming I was the reason. That would have been enough of a story on its own. It wasn't the whole one. Because the same week, digging through Peter's old shoebox for the photo I half remembered, I found something that had nothing to do with Vanessa at all. A hotel receipt. Recent. Dated the weekend of his supplier conference 8 months earlier, in a city that had never once come up in any conversation about her. Vanessa hadn't even started at the company yet when that receipt was printed. Whoever he'd been with that weekend wasn't the woman I'd just spent 2 weeks investigating. It was someone I hadn't even started looking for. I sat with both pieces of paper on the kitchen table, the resume date and the hotel receipt, and understood that I'd spent 2 weeks so focused on the ghost from his past that I'd nearly missed the much more recent one standing closer than I thought. I asked him about the receipt directly, calmly, the same night. He didn't have a story rehearsed for that one the way he had for Vanessa. He just went very still and said her name, not Vanessa's. Someone from a supplier firm, someone I'd met exactly once, at a holiday party, who'd complimented my dress and asked polite questions about my job. Vanessa left the company at the end of that month, on her own, before anyone forced the question. She told HR she'd taken the role for reasons that stopped making sense, and nobody asked her to elaborate. Peter and I separated 4 months later, not over Vanessa, who turned out to be exactly what he'd claimed. An old flame he'd never touched again, a mistaken judgment rather than a mistake in fidelity. Over the other name, the one I only found because I was looking for someone else entirely. I think about that sometimes. That the person I spent 2 weeks suspecting was innocent, and the one I never once considered was the one who wasn't. I don't know if that makes the story a warning about trusting your instincts, or about how easily they can point you at exactly the wrong door. If you'd found both pieces of paper the same week, would you have confronted the recent one first or the old one, like I did?